Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. I am joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics, and we are here to preview the Esports World Cup. This is pseudo-champs. This is actually an arguably better format than champs. It's a pretty engaged, it's going to be a pretty fun tournament, actually. And yeah, this is going to be it for us for this year. But yeah, but first we get this awesome tournament. It's like a bonus champs. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Yeah, excited to talk about this tournament. This is something new. We have not seen the Esports World Cup yet. We're not going to talk about the entire thing. We are going to just talk about the Call of Duty part. But I guess it's been going on for weeks at this point. A lot of money at stake. I think the COD prize pool is 1.8 million, and I want to say champs was 2 million. So it's basically, as big as champs. And everyone's invited, so we have a ton of teams, a lot to talk about, as always. But yeah, it's a little bittersweet, though, to be having the last episode of the season here today. But the next season will come quicker than we expect, for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I've seen some clips for Black Ops 6. That looks really good. And I'm really excited for the next season. And as you can see, you can even see here up at the top, I don't think this team is going to be here next year, but this is a different logo. So unfortunately, it appears as though rest in peace Minnesota Rocker and rest in peace New York Subliners. And also, this is no longer this logo either. This is a different logo. But yeah, I think the CDL is going to look very different in just a couple of weeks from now. But anyways, news of the week. Your Call of Duty League champions, Optic Texas, which I don't think is going to be called Optic Texas for much longer, but that's fine. They won champs. They went undefeated. They went 4-0 through the tournament. They beat LEG, Thieves, Subliners, and then they beat Subliners 3-2 in map 5. And then they just basically destroyed Subliners in the final. Subliners came second. They beat Toronto out in the semifinals. Thieves were there as well. Toronto beat them out. FaZe, 5th, 6th. Just an absolute. Now, to be fair, though, the losers bracket got a bit crazy there in terms of the teams there. So someone had to lose, but man, it was just they got wiped out early, and then obviously Miami, Seattle, and then LEG went 0-3, 0-6. So not a great look for them in possibly their last tournament ever. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, though. Any thoughts here about champs? What'd you like about it? What'd you think about it?
Yeah, very entertaining. I feel like this year's champs was the most chaotic one we've had so far. Optic Texas were the 3 seed going into the tournament, and the talk around them was just like, what has gone wrong? But I do want to take some credit because I did hold steady with Optic. I did say they're hosting champs. They've won not a lot in the last month or so, but a lot of those losses that they had were so close. And I think that break between the end of Major 4 and champs was huge for them. There was, I think 3 weeks off in between that. And I just thought, hey, they still look great in Hardpoint. A lot of their struggles have been in Search and Destroy. And we know Search is the flukiest game mode, so teams can go cold at that at times. And yeah, they bounced back in a big way. They did not lose a series at all, which is great. The one caveat I'll put with this, and I don't want to take anything away from Optic because they looked like the best team on Champs Weekend, their path was really nice. And this was something that I mentioned in the Champs preview was, okay, they're the 3 seed, but to me, they got the easiest draw in round 1 because LAG made that surge at Major 4. And I think if you asked most COD League fans who was the worst team to make champs, I think most people would say LAG. So that was a great draw for Optic Texas in round 1. And then a couple close calls, right? LA Thieves, 3-2 win. Subliners in the winners bracket finals, 3-2 win. But wins are wins. But yeah, they proved everything in the grand finals. That a 5-1 win over New York. It's another year where the grand finals is a snooze fest, which was unfortunate to see. But yeah, just really cool to see them win in Dallas or Arlington or whatever city they were in down in Texas. But they avoided FaZe. They avoided Toronto completely. So that's really nice. But yeah, you mentioned it too. The lower bracket got way out of whack because Toronto lost their round 1 game. And that threw everything for a loop. Atlanta was upset by New York in the upper bracket. You had Atlanta and Toronto duking it out in the second round of the lower bracket, and not a lot of people saw that coming. So that really shook things up. That allowed Thieves to catapult up into fourth place. But yeah, everything else I'd say was pretty standard. LAG finished top 8. Seattle finished top 8, which I thought made some sense. I thought Miami had the slight edge, and it turns out that they did. But yeah, overall, really entertaining champs, except for the grand finals. So maybe next year we'll get a grand finals that is at least a little longer than 6 games. But overall, pretty good.
That's the hope, yeah. And again, they did have an easy path, but again, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. You won, that's all that matters. But again, yeah, you didn't have to play FaZe or Toronto, but yeah, no, 100% a win. And you know what, shout out to them as their first win as an organization since I believe it was 2014. It's been a long drought for this organization, probably one of the most passionate organizations in all of sports. And yeah, shout out to them. I'm actually pretty happy they did win. Obviously, I had subliners. They came second. But again, I am happy Optic did win though. Okay, now the Esports World Cup. As some of you may have realized, Optic is the old OG Optic Gaming logo. G2, it's a different logo from Minnesota Rocker. This is the G2 logo that they use in League of Legends and in CSGO. Team Heretics. It used to be the Miami Heretics. They're just Team Heretics now, and this is the same logo they use in League of Legends as well. 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves is back. No more LA Thieves. It is 100 Thieves. This is the same logo they use in League of Legends as well. AF, Atlanta FaZe. They're still Atlanta FaZe for some reason, but they're struggling as an organization, so that's a little bit concerning as well. Ultra still here, though, and obviously Cloud9 instead of New York Subliners. They were bought out by them, and they're Cloud9, and this is the same logo and same team brand that they use in League of Legends as well. And I think this is the same as they use in CSGO as well. But I haven't followed CSGO in a while. And obviously we have these 5 challengers teams. LAG decided not to participate in this tournament for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, leaving a massive wide open question mark about their future participation in the CDL. It's a bit weird though, because this is functionally free money, so I don't know why you wouldn't take that opportunity. But again, a lot of their team left, so that suggests that we're done, right? And if you're, as an organization, you're like, I don't care about this anymore, our team isn't particularly worth anything, we're just gonna, because you have to pay the players, you probably have to pay to get them there. Okay, maybe you can win some money, but honestly, at a certain point, you just say whatever. If Stan Kroenke is, I'm absolutely done with this, I want nothing to do with this ever again, then maybe he's just like, whatever, shut it down now, we're done. And you'll see that LAG has been dissolved and some other team takes their place or whatever, right? Interesting things on that. Seattle still staying the same. Las Vegas Legion staying the same for some reason. Carolina Ravens staying the same for some reason. And Ultra, obviously. Ultra, I think of the two that make the most sense, Ultra and FaZe, they make the most sense. They are two of the bigger brands in the league, especially Ultra. The association with Canada and Toronto was obviously huge. But Seattle staying the same, these ones staying the same has surprised me a little bit. But again, it is really early. I think maybe we could see that change in the very... Because the other ones had like existing logo branding. Obviously, Optic, Cloud9, Team Heretics, 100 Thieves. They had existing organization structures, so it made sense to just change that right now. But I think for the other ones, I think you're going to see a very quick change after this year. Thoughts on these different groups? Do you think that there's one group in particular that you think is more challenging or not? What do you think?
Yeah, that's always the talking point with this sort of tournament format when you have group play. What is the group of death? What is the cupcake group? Whatever you want to call it. It's hard to say. I feel like they're pretty well balanced. I think Group D sticks out very clearly just because you have 2 challengers teams among 2 CDL teams that are considered good. One is perhaps the best of the bunch, and then 100 Thieves are, I would say, probably the 5th best, 6th best team in the CDL. So good luck to those challengers teams. I believe that's Team Falcons and Lore Gaming. So maybe you can make it out of that, but probably not. But yeah, I think pretty well balanced overall. I know for the seeding, they just went by like the CDL champs in order. Like Optic were first, so they were the first team in Group A. Subliners were second, so they're the first team in Group B, on, and then reverse order for the challengers teams. for their finish at the Challengers Finals. But yeah, just I want to make clear, if I accidentally say New York or subliners at any point, Cloud9. That is going to take some getting used to. If I say LA Thieves, 100 Thieves. Just bear with us if we stumble over the team names, but for the most part, they match up pretty closely. But yeah, excited to see how this 16-team format plays out. If I'm not mistaken, this is pretty much like the Pro-Am that we had 2 years ago, I think in like December, and I want to say, I don't remember, New York Subliners, I think, won that, but again, that was a little while ago. But this looks very similar to that, but yeah, just here are the logos, here are the teams. I don't know, do you think New York Subliners come out decked out in Cloud9 stuff? Or are they going to be New York Subliners representing Cloud9 Gaming, the organization? Because that's something I've been debating with a little bit. We'll find out soon enough, but just what are your thoughts on that?
It is interesting because I was really because obviously the Lions came out for the Esports World Cup a couple days ago. Oh, it might be a bit ago. Though there was tournament winning lines earlier. And when they released the logos and everything, I was really surprised that it was these logos. The thing is, it's just who cares, right? It's Optic Gaming, right? It doesn't matter, right? I was surprised, though, because I thought it would be Champs was a couple weeks ago. It's still New York Subliners, right? And to be fair, in my model, it still says Subliners. I have not changed it to Cloud9, mostly because I don't care at this point. I'm calculating a couple of games. It literally does not matter. I don't care, right? But I'm surprised that they use the new logos and the new names and the new branding. Right now, in my model, I'll update it for next year. But I thought they would still stick with it. I thought it'd be Minnesota for G2. I thought it would still be Subliners. But Esports World Cup is just we don't care, right? It's interesting, and we'll get into this in a second, how some teams have changed a little bit, some teams haven't. But yeah, it is interesting to me that we're getting the new logos and the new branding at least partially immediately. That is really interesting to me. And I thought it was going to be a more nuanced discussion later of this team is changing names, this team isn't changing names, this team doesn't exist anymore, this team is coming in, this team is leaving. Maybe I feel like this is like a half step where like some of them have happened already and some of them are yet to happen. Again, I'd be very surprised if we see if it's Las Vegas Legion competing in Black Ops 6, I'd be very surprised if that was the case. It might just be the fact that they just didn't have time to pull off a merger and acquisition or something. I don't know. But there's some of this where I think this is a weird kind of half step where some teams were super quick to get the updated logo in there. But again, they might just wear the same jerseys. Like the Subliners could come out in their like yellow and gray, right? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to have full Cloud9 jerseys. If you work for Cloud9, I'd start FedExing Hydra a Cloud9 jersey, but again, that's what I would do, but we'll have to see. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I think I wasn't expecting the new logos and branding this fast. I thought it was going to take a bit longer, but we'll have to see. Roster Mania, and we've already had a little mini Roster Mania. This is, again, this kind of half step that I'm talking about here. Beans is on Carolina Royal Ravens replacing Clayster. I'm fairly sure it's Clayster. I don't know where Clayster is or what he's doing. I guess he didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, or he doesn't want to be on the. That one's weird to me. But Beans is there. G2 absorbed part of LAG. They took Diamond Con and Estrel, I guess, two of the better players from LAG, in place of
Standy and Gunless.
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit of an upgrade. It's about right. It's a bit of an upgrade. And then Boston basically did an almost team wipe, except they kept Snoopy. But then they basically brought in the Omit team of Cammy, Awakening, and Purge, which was actually already basically a CDL team that was competing in Challengers. So there's some changes there. Other than that, everything else is the same. There's been no other team changes. And then we see a lot of names we know here. Glow, Frosty, Fire, Prolute, Spark, Bance, Denza, Harry, I think, was a competitor on London Royal Ravens. Asim here. Asim is back. Brack, also back. He competed for Ultra back in 2020. Exceed, again, another LAG alum. Too Real, he was on Optic?
Mutineers at some point? I think he's bounced around a little bit, but yeah.
He's bounced around. Arcities, basic FaZe Seattle alum Paul X, again another London Royal Ravens alum. He was on some other teams as well. And Ulysses, I think he was on something as well, right?
Yes, maybe Legion. I don't know. I wanted to list out these names just to see, how many of these Challengers players have we heard of, and it's a lot. Like, I've heard of at least one person on each of those Omit, Gentlemates, Stallions, and Lore. I've heard of nobody on Team Falcons. They were the qualifier from the Middle East, North Africa region. They're probably not that good, but they're their names. They could make a name for themselves if they beat FaZe or do something crazy. But not a ton of movement for the CDL teams. 8 of the 11 that are here have the same team that they ended the season with. But it is worth noting, like, Ravens, one change. G2 is essentially Rocker and LAG merged into one. And then Boston are trying something new, which is smart because, they did not end the year particularly well. Just something to keep in mind. There are a lot of new teams here, and there's a lot of CDL teams that are going through some changes. Just something to keep in the back of your mind for sure.
Yeah, and I never heard of any of these guys. I don't even know. Is that 5 Aldex? Aldex?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
We'll hear the commentators say it for sure. Okay, here's the details of it. So it's GSL group play, which is basically win 2 before losing 2. That's the way you think of GSL. It's basically you have a matchup, you win that matchup, you go against the other team that won. If you win, you qualify. If not, you drop down and you play the winner of the other game. That's basically it. It's very simple in terms of the GSL style groups. Obviously, best of 5 series, that hasn't changed. Top 2 teams in each group advance, so very similar to the Pro-Am we had before. All 20 games played in 2 days. Wow. Call of Duty League. Take notes. We could play 20 games in 2 days. That's crazy, I know. Unfortunately, it's with a bunch of Challenger teams, but that's fine. We're not picking nitpicking things here. We're just broad progress. Knockout bracket, single elimination. That's unfortunate, but that's okay. This isn't the biggest tournament, and again, it's still better than Champs, arguably. Best of 5 series for the bracket, best of 7 Champs, quarterfinals on 8/17, and then semifinals and championship on 8/18. So I guess that's basically saying that there's going to be 4 games on 8/17 and then 3 on 8/18, which is next Saturday. We were recording to Full Prosperity. We're recording this on the 6th. This will begin next Thursday, and then it will end next Sunday. So it's a 4-day tournament, just like every other Call of Duty tournament. That's kind of cool. And then you can see the pricing, which is insane pricing. I think this is, double the Champs final? Or no?
It's
how
close.
How much did the winning team in Champs get?
800,000, I think, this year. It's gone down steadily over the last few years. So this is just under Champs, which is it's a huge deal. This tournament has a ton of cash at stake, and they're even giving $50K to whoever gets MVP, which I think is interesting. I just think it's important to note how much money is at stake here, and it's a ton. The one thing that's getting me a little worried is there's this much money at stake, and we're doing an 8-team single elim bracket that. Woo! Those knockout bracket matches are going to be fun to watch because every match is going to mean 40,000, 80,000, 100,000 if you win it or lose it. And one other thing to point out, even just showing up, you're getting 20,000. So if you go 0-2 and you don't win a map, good on you. You're getting 20K. So not bad at all.
And I think that might be one of the reasons why LEG opted out, right? So, okay, the team gets 20,000. Say you go 0-2 out, right? The team gets 20K, and then you claw some of that back, but at the same time, you shelled out money to send your entire team and probably a coach. So that's 5 people. That's 5 seats. You're probably paying first class to Saudi Arabia. That's probably 5 by 4. You're probably paying 20 grand to send them there, and you're going to get 10 back. So you're basically, that makes sense. Someone said this doesn't make mathematical sense for us to do this. We don't care anymore. We're done. That's probably why they didn't go. That makes a lot more sense now. Just running quick numbers in my head. But that's interesting. But and I really like the idea of the tournament MVP winning money. I don't think that was the case I'm not sure if the League of Legends tournament even had a tournament MVP for 50,000. That's cool. But anyway, Moving on, here you go. Here's the bracket. Group A, we've got.
So
Oh,
this is I'll
Oh,
go
okay.
over
Go
this
ahead. You
real
go ahead.
quick.
You go.
So I wanted just to make a what will the bracket look like type of graphic based on, who advances out of Group A, B, C, D. So you can see there, like, the Group A winner will play the Group B runner-up. The Group D winner will play the Group C runner-up, and then on and on. So I just wanted that, like, I was looking for that everywhere, and I did find it on one of those, like, CDL Wikipedia websites. And this is the bracket that they had listed. I didn't find this on the actual Esports World Cup page, so I don't know if it's 100% legit or not, but I saw it and it made sense to me, so I just put it here. And then, based on the futures markets, I just penciled in, okay, if all the favorites come through that win the group or that finish runner-up, this is what it will look like. And unsurprisingly, we have 8 CDL teams here. And I just wanted to make one note of, like, where is FaZe? Because to me, they are still the best team despite not winning recently. They'd be on the top side of the group, or top side of the bracket with Optic, interestingly enough, perhaps the hottest team right now. And then you'd have Toronto and Cloud9 / New York Subliners on the bottom side of the bracket there. Yeah, once we get to bracket play, these are going to be fun matches, and it's highly unlikely that the teams will shake out exactly like this, because Ravens could take Legion's spot, or, I don't know, one of those big 4 teams maybe gets runner-up rather than winning their group, and then they're on the other side of the bracket because of that. We could have a really interesting setup where 3 of those top 4 are all grouped together, and then there's one top team all by themselves, and I don't know. We'll see how it all shakes out, but yeah, this is what we would expect if all the favorites basically do what they're supposed to do.
I agree with that. I think that's an interesting piece to this, and that is really a big part of this too, right? Because it's okay. Optic's path to the final goes through FaZe and whatever's left down here. Ultra ducks FaZe and Ultra, and to be fair, Subliners, they duck both FaZe and Optic until the finals. So that plays a lot into the getting to the finals part. And I think that's what we're going to talk about now. Being the market combined all picks, I had a bad week. You also had a bad week for champs. Again, a bad first day of champs. And then Doug did slightly better. He got Optic versus... I'm still mad about Subliners against Seattle. They just decided not to cover this spread. FaZe also decided not to cover the spread. They were like up... I was watching this game, I think they were up like 180 to 80. I'm like, we're good. And then they just didn't cover the spread for some reason. I don't know why. That was very annoying. Subliners Seattle was actually close, but then Subliners just screwed up the hard point, so they couldn't cover the 1.5, and whatever. FaZe to win champs, that was rough. Again, they played a good team in the losers bracket, that was a problem. Optic runner up, losing that in the most hilarious way,
Yeah,
and then
with my picks, I just want to mention quickly, I need to cope through this, because when we recorded, my original pick 2 and pick 3 were Optic to reach the final and Toronto to reach the final at shorter prices. And then they released exact outcome markets where you could take a team to win, to get second, to get third, to get top 8, like exactly where their finish was. And my numbers showed, okay, all of the value in that Optic and Toronto to reach the final is all baked into exactly finishing as the runner-up. So I'm like, all right, I'll just take them both as runner-up. If they both get there, someone is getting runner-up, and if everything works how I think it might, Atlanta will beat one of those teams in the grand final. And boy, oh boy, like, I knew once, like, Toronto lost their round 1 game, I'm like, man, this is not going to go well, because something's going to happen to FaZe, and then they're going to meet, and then Optic will just win it, and that's exactly how it played out. So I don't know. I want to say I was directionally accurate, but man, like, it all just... I could see it going downhill real fast, and that's how it happened. But nonetheless, we have one more week of making picks, so we'll see if we can do something about it.
I do want to say, though, that, like, this, you basically had... I think Ultra was favored against Subliners, I think, in their loser bracket final match, I think, right?
I don't know. It would have been close.
It was either favorites...
For sure.
They're no higher than minus 125. So basically like even. Basically evens each way. And you basically had an even price at plus 350 because if you had Ultra won that game, you would have been guaranteed one of those to hit. So you would have been in good shape. But unfortunately, Ultra lost, knocking them out, and then Optic also lost, or Optic won, and then that was. But had Ultra beaten Subliners, you would have been in really good shape there. So that's unfortunate.
One other
And
thing I want
to,
to, and then I'll stop. I know this is a lot. I almost pivoted, like when I pivoted to Optic in Toronto to finish exactly runner-up, I almost changed my Toronto runner-up to Seattle finish 7th, 8th. And sure enough, they did. It took a Game 5, Round 11 against Miami, but that would have been a nice call as well. But I was like, no, let's just push all my chips into the runner-up basket. And yeah, just, I don't know. It was not my week, but yeah, anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah, not great for the combined medal place, but again, very few of them in anything. We just had the LA Thieves map too, which is again one of the maps they didn't beat Toronto Ultra in. They did win that series 3-1. Ultra looked very weird there. Anyway, match previews. We're not going to spend the most time on some of them. We will spend more time on than others because we don't have numbers for some of these. Some of these are just challenger teams. But this is one of the ones we actually have numbers for. Legion versus Ravens. Legion minus 125 on the money line, minus 1.5 plus 175. Map 1 minus 135, map 2 minus 110, map 3 minus 115. So basically even. These are basically very close. I actually have Carolina as the favorite, which is crazy. But to be fair, Ravens were a pretty good team. They just got locked. They got really jammed in the last major. And Legion just got lucky. And your model is also seeing it too, where we're, hey, we Carolina here. Are you with me on Carolina? Because I know they got rid of Clayster, and I know people are like, oh, Clayster, but like, I do not mind Clayster being replaced with someone else. That's how I will say that. That's how I will say that sentence. Do you agree with me on that or not?
Completely, yes. That is the one thing that gives me pause with Ravens is the team change. But that goes both ways. That could be a positive for them as well. Clayster is a player of note just because he gives you something. Like, yes, he's 30 or 31 years old, and maybe he's not peak Clayster anymore, but he adds something to the team, I think. Definitely. He's still good enough to compete, and when he's on your team, it's just a different vibe, I feel. Like, he's just the clear-cut leader. He knows what he's talking about. He's been doing this forever. So replacing him with Beans, maybe skill-wise, is a lateral move, or maybe it's good. You could say it's a positive. But just, I don't know, the dynamic of the team is going to be much different without Clayster on it. That being said, yeah, these teams are really close in my mind. I was shocked to see, like, when I punched in the numbers, I was like, all right, Legion versus Ravens, what are the odds? Yeah, my model says 60-40 Ravens, and maybe that's a touch high based on Clayster leaving now. But I don't think it's that far off of what I truly believe. I really do think this is a close match, but yeah, I don't know. There's enough holes in Legion's game that give me pause. And yeah, I feel better about Ravens in Search. Very good about them in Search and Destroy. Control, I think, is going to be basically a straight-up toss-up. I really do think whoever wins Map 3 wins the series. And I know that's not saying much because that's a lot of times that is how it goes, but yeah, Control is going to be huge for this. But yeah, I agree. I think Ravens maybe just got a little overlooked toward the end of the season. They did get boxed out at Champs with how LAG finished and all of that, craziness that happened the final day of qualifiers, and then couldn't make the run at Major 4. But yeah, just a really interesting matchup here between these two teams. But I totally agree with you. I think Ravens are the side to take here, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think they could pull off, quote unquote, the upset here. I don't know why Legion is the favorite, but we'll see. Okay, this one is one we don't know very much about. Optic versus Omit Brooklyn. I think they're a team, and they're like a European team for League of Legends, but whatever. No money line for Optic. That's great. I don't think there is. Let me check to see if there's any numbers on that. I don't think there is, or it's some obscene number. Yeah, it's minus 20,000. Okay. Optic minus 2.5, minus 310. Omit plus 2.5, plus 225. Minus 1,800 map 1. Minus 500 map 2, and then minus 1,400 map 3. we're mostly going to skip through these. I think you have a model here. How do you model this?
Yeah,
Where do these numbers come from? Yeah.
this was a fun exercise. So all of these matches that have a CDL team with a challengers team, I had to fudge the numbers a little bit, but I wanted to see like how close could I get? Like how does this make sense? How can I actually produce numbers for this game? So what I did was in my head-to-head match calculator, I would put the CDL team on the left. In this case, it's Optic. And then I would put the worst CDL team in Hardpoint, the worst CDL team in Search, and the worst CDL team in Control. And I would go through and calculate what Optic would be favored against that team. And the worst, if I remember correctly, the worst Hardpoint and Search teams were Boston for both. And the worst Control team, according to my numbers, is Seattle. That might be foreshadowing for later. So basically I said, okay, what if Optic played that team? What if they played Boston in map 1, Boston in map 2, and Seattle in map 3? But what if we made them a little bit worse even, like that fake CDL team? So I juiced up the numbers for Optic just a little bit in each mode, like 5-ish%. So you can see there in their Hardpoint map 1, I think I bumped them up. They would be like a 90% favorite, so I made them about a 95% favorite in map 1, and so on and so forth for map 2 and map 3. So that's where I got my numbers. I don't know if they're super accurate or not because I'm treating all of these challengers teams the same, and I know that's not the case. I do know there are better ones and worse ones, and I tried to fudge the numbers specifically for that in some later matches, which we'll talk about. But yeah, as you can see, there's not a lot of value here. Like when you have the prices so astronomical on the Optic side, there's really nothing of note. And actually, like the plus 2.5 for Omit might be the move. I don't know. A lot of that is based on Control. But again, I really don't know if I'm pricing that super accurately. But yeah, this is where I land. I have Optic to win 99.0% of the time. So yeah, the minus 20,000 is pretty spot on if you ask me. So yeah, I don't know. This will be the most we talk about one of these games just because I wanted to give my methodology and how I calculated these. But yeah, to no surprise, Optic should run away with this pretty easily.
Yeah, I will say that generally, again, we have somewhat limited experiences with betting on challengers teams versus CDL teams. I think, was it just the Pro-Am? Or was there another tournament that had it? There's been two Pro-Ams, right? Yeah.
You say that, and I think you're right, but I can't think of what the other one would have been.
It was in Vanguard.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of, I think. But
maybe?
I don't know. Either way, we don't see it a lot, but I'm just making that assumption that these challengers teams, I'm going to assume they're the worst of the CDL teams, plus a little extra worse, if that makes any sense.
No, and that's a really good point on that, right? Because there is no way to... The thing is, say, for example, I'll use a college football example, because that's probably the closest. Say it's a Big Ten team, which is one of the top conferences, against a lower team, like a MAC team, right? You can make adjustments. Be like, how have Big Ten teams generally done against MAC teams in the past? And you can make that adjustment as based on the quality of the Big Ten team and the quality of the MAC team. You can make that adjustment. Here, last time a Challengers team played a Call of Duty League team was 2 years ago. You can't really make that adjustment, but what you can do is you can say, okay, the best Challengers team is probably a little bit worse than the worst Call of Duty League team, and I like that adjustment. That's a really good adjustment. One point that is missing, though, and I think this might be where your map 2 number is a bit low, is because a lot of them will play Search and Destroy very differently. So they have no concept. So, and again, let's say you're Optic, right? Cool, you won champs. Cool. You now are told you're playing some team you've never heard of before with players you are vaguely familiar with. And you're like, okay, maybe we're going to go through and watch some challengers highlights of something, and you're maybe getting a couple games of them, maybe. I feel like there's a huge opportunity there for you to miss some stuff, or also for you to not even care, right? With a line of minus 2.5, minus 310, that line is too big, right? Do you really think Optic is going to care if they drop a game? No, but at a minus 310 point, you really care, right? Especially with these challengers teams. And we saw this a little the last time they played too. Well, what we saw was they came close. I think I think it was only Toronto Ultra Challengers team, the good Toronto Ultra Challengers team from 2 years ago. They beat a CDL team. I think they were the only team to beat a CDL team, but they did not qualify. They still didn't qualify in that group because they still lost the other two CDL teams, but they came close, right? And that's like your peak. That was the best time. That's the best performance you've ever seen a Challengers team have. What I would say is, obviously, we're not betting Optic money line, and obviously, we're not betting Omit money line either. But you could convince me on throwing up, like, throw $10 on a plus 2.5. What's the worst that could happen? You lose it. Okay. And if Optic just says, screw it, we don't care about Search and Destroy, and we lose 6-4 or whatever because they played Search and Destroy weird, great, you win $25, right? Who cares? This is where I would say that there's some advantages to just throwing some stiff on the plus 2.5s. Again, it's such low risk and it's such high reward because of this number, because the people are going to be throwing everything on this number, right? If you lose it, great, whatever, doesn't matter. But if you win it, you can get massive returns from that. No second mortgage on this stuff, but you could do this. Match, I guess, 2. Group B match 1, Seattle versus G2. This one is interesting. This is, again, the second of the third match we can actually talk about. Seattle is minus 360 on the money line. It's a big number. Minus 1.5, minus 165. I actually think it's up now. I think it's up to minus 175 now. Minus 310 on the map 1, minus 155 on the map 2, and minus 200 on the map 3. And this one is interesting because we are both showing, and this set out to be clear, we have not. I don't know if you made any adjustments, but I have not made any adjustments for team changes at all. I have not done any adjustments for that. This is what I think Minnesota Rocker would do against Seattle. And we both have pretty large value on Minnesota against Seattle here. Now, Seattle did not have a great chance, right? They lost to New York relatively rough. It was a pretty rough loss. They should have lost 3-1. They probably should have lost both hard points, but they lost the first hard point, won the second. And then they lost to Miami, which Miami is not amazing, but not a bad team either. Minnesota was doing a bit better, but they fell short at the end of this year. You take the best pieces of LAG, which was something, and then you take the best pieces of LAG of Minnesota, and that's not a half-bad team. And I really don't hate the idea of you're getting G2 plus 1.5, and you're getting a money line of plus 255. That seems like insane value for a team that could actually like legitimately win this match. This Rocker team, there you go. This G2 team, not that bad. This is definitely a very playable line in my opinion. What do you think here?
Yeah, totally agree. The tricky thing with this is trying to decipher, is this the best Minnesota pair plus the best LAG pair? That's tricky. And LAG they're hard to figure out, and they're not in this tournament, obviously, but are the two players that G2 absorbed, that Rocker absorbed, DiamondCon and Estriel. I don't know how it all shook out in the LAG camp. They're not here. You mentioned it might have been financials. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe we'll get 40K, but at minimum is 20K. Like, it could have been financials. It could have been that 2 of the 4 players on the team didn't want to compete, or the coach didn't want to compete, and they said, listen, we're not going to go if only half of us want to go, but maybe DiamondCon and Estriel said, we do want to go, and maybe Minnesota, G2, said, we'll take you, and we'll drop Standy and Gunless. I don't know how that all shook out. What I do know is that Seattle is not this good. Like, the price on Seattle is just so big. And they are favorites. I don't doubt that whatsoever. I think Seattle Surge should win this match. But, like I said earlier, they are the worst control team, according to my numbers, from the entirety of last season. And it got a little better towards the end of the year with that new lineup. Once 04 came in and Abuza and Brezzi. Once they figured out their lineup, things got better. So there is some early season stuff that are affecting those control numbers. But Seattle went 0-2 at control at champs. Both of those were round 5 losses on Invasion, which those happen. But still, I think if you combine Minnesota control with LAG control, it's not great, but it's not dead last. So to me, the shocking thing was seeing G2 at plus 150 on map 3. I think they are very live for that. I think at worst it's a toss-up. And if not, they should actually be the favorites. So that's where most of my value is coming from, but I definitely think they can compete in map 1 or map 2, and one of those will be G2's pick. So whatever map they want to play on. Obviously, the tricky thing with G2, like with Ravens earlier, is this is a different team, right? This is a team that didn't exist last season. We're trying to make predictions on how they will fare against a Seattle team that we absolutely know what they are. So yeah, map vetoes, we'll see how they play out. Does it look more like what Rocker vetoed? Is it more like what LAG vetoed during the season? I don't know. What I do know is some of these prices on G2 just seem way too good to pass up. I'm with you again on this one. I think G2 Esports is the way to go. It hurts me that it's not Minnesota Rocker, but either way, I'll get used to it. And I don't know, maybe I'll just switch my fandom to some other organization that's actually good. Who knows? But yeah, G2 Esports all the way.
You got the Green Bay G on your chest. G. There's a pairing there. There's a pairing there.
True. But again, Robert, I might want to ditch them. I don't know if they're the best org to root for. Yeah.
Okay. This is the thing. You're faced with this decision now. I don't like. Remember that Toronto Ultra is owned by Mad Lions. So that is also an organization that we could very easily get a press release in a couple weeks saying, yeah, no, we're Mad Lions now. Which I would still root for the team because I do like Scrap, I do like Kleenex, I like Insight, like Envoy too, right? I do these guys, I would root for them, but I would be sad to lose my team. It is tough. Yeah, that is unfortunate. But I think, we'll see. I think there is still some connection to there's not really much connection to Minnesota, but we'll see. Maybe you get to find a new team now. You get to shop around. You could be a Cloud9 fan, or you could be an Optic fan. You get to shop around now, so it's good.
True. Yeah.
Okay. Now another one we're not going to talk a lot about. Cloud9. Wow. Oh, this is the same line. Is this the same? Did they just copy the same line basically?
Yep, exactly the same. Mm-hmm.
They may have done this. They may have done the same analysis as you, honestly. And again, look, plus 225. There you go. Right. They may have done this. I would not put it past them to have just done the same analysis and been like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's the same thing, right? And I can see it, right? Yeah, same analysis. Plus 225, plus 2.5, plus 225. I guarantee you if you put like $1 on all those, with probably one exception of FaZe, if you put like $1 on all of, not $1, if you put $10 on all the plus 2.5s at plus 225, you'll make money from it. Because again, remember, only like one of them needs to cash, right? If one of them cashes, you win. If two of them cash, you're amazing, right? I think that's the strategy for this. Anything you want to say about this game or not?
Yeah, just you pointed it out already. Prices are exactly the same as that Optic versus Omit game, and I just grade out Optic better than formerly New York Subliners. And again, I'm treating Gentlemates basically the same as Omit. And looking at the teams, maybe Omit is better. I really have no clue. So again, I'm just blanket saying these are bad teams. And if that's the case, I would rather take Gentlemates against a not quite as good team. Just don't get me wrong, Cloud9, New York Subliners are fantastic, but we just saw them go up against Optic in 2 different matches a few weeks ago, and Optic were clearly better than them. I thought Optic were better than them even before that. They were the 3 seed, Cloud9, New York were the 4 seed, so that's very clear to me. I guess maybe the prices are the same because Gentlemates are viewed as slightly worse than Omit. I don't really know. But point is, like, yeah, at a plus 225, like, maybe they have the firepower to take a search and destroy. My numbers seem to indicate that, like, Control maybe is consistently the one that's overlooked. Again, I have no idea how vetoes are going to play out for that. But Control is also somewhat fluky at times. Like, we've seen it with like high-rise Control, just like tanks blowing up left and right. There's only 5 rounds at most. So if you can somehow squeeze out a round 5 defense on Invasion, if you're Gentlemates, like there's your path to getting a map win. It's going to be really hard, don't get me wrong, but there's enough craziness that happens in COD games, and these teams I think are good enough, these Challenger teams are good enough to put up somewhat of a fight. Don't get me wrong, some of them are going to get absolutely slammed. We saw that at the Pro-Am a couple years ago. Some of those teams did not look even remotely close to these pro teams, but we had some evidence that some of these challenger teams could fight a little bit, and that's all we're asking for with these. So again, I would lean Gentlemates, but I mean, I'm not crazy, so I'm probably just going to avoid this.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Next up, Heretics versus Breach. This is one we can actually talk about. This is, I believe, the third and last one we can actually talk with analysis. Heretics, minus 260 on the money line, minus 1.5, plus 100. Minus 200 on the map 1, minus 225 map 2, and plus 100 map 3. And again, there are no spreads for any of these yet. It's still a little too early, and for some of these, I don't think they're going to offer spreads on especially the challengers teams. But my model, at least, is low on Boston. I get it. I understand why it's low on Boston, but I could definitely see a bullish case here for Boston. I think Boston could do something here. Miami was a pretty good team all year round, not a bad team, but when you look at this Boston team, you're getting Cammy and Awakening. I guess that brand is long since dead, but this is somewhat of an Awakening revenge game. It's against the brand that replaced the brand that replaced the brand of the team that dropped him. Cammy, again, I think Cammy was on Rocker or Ravens, or one of those. He was on, so he's now making his return to the CDL. Purge was good, right? I don't think this team is going to be that bad. I really don't hate Boston here. I think Boston was really struggling all year long, and I think they finally made a team change that they desperately needed to make, and I think this team could be not half bad. Give me Boston here. If I'm picking a side here, I'm taking Boston. This Heretics team was good, but honestly, when you're getting me plus 1.5, minus 130, and you're getting me money line plus 190, I'll take that all day rather than a massively overpriced Heretics team. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's more of a stay away for me. This, of the 3 games that are CDL team versus CDL team, this is the one I feel the least confident about by far, just because Boston Breach is essentially a completely new team at this point. And yeah, you mentioned Awakening, kind of revenge game. He used to play for Boston Breach too, so he is reunited with his old org, so that's fun. Yeah, and Cammy and Purge we've seen, and Purge was on Legion earlier this year, and people were like mocking him for how his numbers looked. But like Legion was still winning games, so he was at least part of a somewhat competent org in Legion when he was on that team. Yeah, Cammy bounced around Minnesota. He was on LA Thieves earlier this year, I believe. We kind of know what we're getting with those. The hope is that these 3 guys around Snoopy are better than the last 3 guys that were around Snoopy. And yeah, maybe that's the case. I don't know. Hopefully their search and destroy isn't a train wreck like it has been all year. The issue is this Miami team is stable, and I think they're solid. I think they're like league average hardpoint, league average search, which for a team that's in a very top-heavy league, that's pretty good. The control is always a little worrisome with them, and I think that's definitely where Boston could catch them if their control doesn't fall off too much with their new lineup. But yeah, Boston is a huge wild card here. I could see him coming out, having success in hardpoint or in search out of nowhere. And for that, this one makes me want to stay away mostly. I definitely think Miami are still the better team, but wouldn't be shocked at all if Boston come out and win this, or at least force the Game 5. Totally justifiable if you like Boston in this spot.
Yeah, agree. Group C, match 2, Ultra versus Stallions. Ultra, massive favorite, minus 1,800, minus 2.5, minus 150, minus 700 on the money line, minus 460 for minus 700 map 1, minus 460 map 2, and then minus 600 map 3. Different numbers than Optic and Cloud9, but still big numbers there. I was wondering what you were going to say, and I agree with you on that. I think Ultra should probably be bigger favorites. One key thing I will note here is that Ultra, they take pleasure in just crushing bad teams. This is the thing, right? They will underperform against the top teams, but you put them up against a bad team, and I think it's a similar core, not the same core, but it's a similar core of players. If you go back to the last Pro-Am, I think they swept the Challengers team they played. This is where it's a lot more, okay, yeah, this is legit. These are I would put money on them to sweep here. I think they are a team that can sweep this. What do you think?
Yeah, this one was a little trickier for me. My numbers do point towards Toronto Ultra to win easily. And their price on this, if you compare this to the Optic price or the Cloud9 price, it is quite a bit shorter when you think about it. Like Toronto to sweep is at minus 150 rather than minus 310. That's a big gap. And I dug into Stallions a little bit, and it looks like they're maybe the best of the bunch for these challengers teams. And they got dudes you've heard of, like Asim, Brack, Exceed, and Rex. Those are all dudes that have experience, at least 3 of the 4, in the CDL. That worries me a little bit. These are guys that are used to the stage. I think, if my memory serves correct, Stallions were the 1 seed for the Challengers Finals tournament. I think they finished 3rd overall, so maybe a little bit of a disappointment, but they were the 1 seed going into that. And again, these teams, there's so many moving parts. I think Stallions were FaZe Black at the time, and now they've rebranded to Stallions because it's the team that Zuma owns, and he's the Italian Stallion. I don't know. A lot of moving parts. I'm pretty sure the Stallions team is half decent, so that's the one worry I have with this. But like you said, like Toronto Ultra, you put them up against bad teams, even average CDL teams at times, and they can just come out and slam them. So I would lean Toronto here. I think if there's one thing that makes sense, like if we zoom out and fast forward after this tournament, I think either all of these elite teams, Atlanta, Toronto, Cloud9, and Optic, I think they'll either all handle business quite easily in these opening matches, or maybe they trip up a little more than we'd expect. It's either one way or the other. And I think if you're making that bet that these elite CDL teams are just going to show up and dominate, this is the team to do it within an opening match. Take this really short price compared to the other ones and just roll with that. If you want to go with Stallions, sure, but I don't know. It's a big I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I agree with that. Okay. FaZe versus Team Falcons. This is the Middle Eastern team, and the price kind of shows that minus 2.5, minus 500, minus 2800 in the hardpoint, 650 in the search, 2800 in the control, and yeah, not much. I feel did you tank them a little bit more because of that as well? I feel like you did.
I didn't really have to. Yeah, okay. So I treated Falcons like I did Omit and Gentlemates, in that they're probably the worst of the bunch. But you're right, like Falcons might be a tier below those teams even. But it's hard to push the numbers up even higher when it's FaZe is on the other side. Like, the numbers can only go so high. Yeah, I have FaZe 95% favorites in Map 1, Map 2, Map 3. And if you run the numbers on that, their odds to win are 99.9%. It's a guaranteed win. The sweep happens at about 80-something% of the time, if those numbers are accurate. And the minus 500 is about 80%, so that's priced about right. I don't know. It's like, this could be like so ugly. Like, this could be like 100-point club, 6-0, 3-0, and it's over in 10 minutes. Like, this could get really ugly. So I don't know if I'm going to watch this unless, like, for some reason Falcons show some fight. But yeah, all things point to FaZe just set a record for a beatdown like we've never seen before. So, yeah.
True. All right, and I think this is the last one. Group D match 2, 100 Thieves versus Lore Gaming. Thieves are minus 225 on the 525 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 200. However, though, minus 2.5 plus 180. So is that true? Yeah, they are actually So for Lore, the plus 1.5 is plus 150. So they're basically saying, hey, Lore isn't bad. Or they're conversely saying Thieves are that bad. Minus 310 on the money line, minus 200 on the money line for map 2, and then minus 240 on the money line for map 3. Yeah, you don't really agree with them, but I'm fairly sure you're using the same kind of analysis. Yeah, again, I'm staying away from these. I don't really have a good feel for these challengers team. I might come back, like if you see one doing really well against a CDL team, then you bet, and they lose. Say they lose like 3-2 or 3-1 or something. Say they lose 3-1 in like excruciating fashion where they lose map 4 by 50 points, then immediately bet on them the next round, right? Bet on them, hey, this team is actually not half bad. That's what I would do. I want to stay away from these. I'm not really touching this. But yeah, I don't really have a good read on this. Do you have anything you want to say about Lore Gaming?
They seem to me like the other half decent challengers team. I think Stallions and Lore are probably the best two out of the five that are here. Two real Arcides, Paul X, Ulysses. We've heard of those names before. Thieves are definitely the worst team to pull a challengers team in round one. So that is the justification of why those prices are so much different, is because Thieves don't belong in the same category as FaZe or Toronto or Cloud9 or Optic. But because Thieves finished fourth at Champs, they get a nice draw and get to play a challengers team. Yeah, I don't know. My numbers, I think, are too high on Thieves map 2, and that's basically where all the value is coming from on that side. So if I just pump those numbers down a little bit and treat Lore Gaming as a half competent search team, then there's just no value to be had anywhere. So fully expect 100 Thieves to take this, but this could be the one sneaky group like where Lore Gaming pull out this win somehow and then go up against FaZe in the next round and get crushed, but actually have a path to make the knockout bracket. I think their path is viable just because it could be as easy as like beat Thieves twice, which isn't that easy when you consider that they're a challengers team, but of all the challengers teams that are here, like their path is pretty clear. So yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. I think it could be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Futures previews, odds via Bet365. These are the odds to win each group. Pretty explanatory of what each is. These all make sense. I'm not seeing anything super, super crazy here. Yeah, I don't see much value here. Do you see any value here?
Not a ton. If you go to the next slide, I have, again, hand calculations for like, you're basically taking a 2-game parlay for these teams. And yeah, to no surprise, Optic, Cloud9, Toronto, and Atlanta are all in that 75 to 80% chance they go in. And to me, like, sure, you can take that if you want. But again, you're paying a huge price. You're paying like minus 300 to do that. And if you're going to do that, like, I just take the future on it. Like, just take them to win the whole thing or to reach the final. Don't take them just to win their group. So, yeah, that's where I go. I think if there's a sneaky team that might come out of nowhere, maybe Ravens. We've talked about them already. They're underdogs to Legion. We don't think they should be that big of underdogs. Maybe they should even be favored. And then if they do win that, they're going to go up against Optic, who are very stiff competition, but they definitely could take them out if things go right. So that's the one long shot I would take here. Everything else is no thanks for me.
Mm-hmm. Also, remember that now usually what happens is for Call of Duty, you win champs, that's it, right? You then get your you get to celebrate, right? And in all sports, right? You win the championship game, right? You go, you celebrate, you have a parade, you drink a lot, right? That's usually what happens for sports, right? Same thing generally for this. However, though, you have to turn around and do another competition, right? And even then, you generally have what's called a championship hangover, where a team that won the championship last year generally isn't as strong initially in the season that precedes it. Now, this is even closer. This is like a couple weeks later. It's like a month later. You're like, hey, you have to move. You have more Call of Duty to play, right? Yeah, you know what? You know what? That might be worth it. What is the price on Carolina to win the group? Plus 600. That's not even that great. That's okay. That's just okay. That's not even. I'm not like, oh man, I gotta. But maybe something on that. Put something on that, maybe. Just for some fun. Odds to reach the final. Here you go. This is roughly what you'd expect. Nothing screams out here, but I'm sure you have the numbers here, yeah. Model, of course, liking FaZe, as always. Mine always does as well. But another interesting one that I actually completely agree with, Ultra here, right? Your price, this is in many ways, I think, like a perfect tournament for Ultra, right? This is like, Ultra underperformed in Major 4 and in Champs, right? They were doing well, right? Ultra had a shot at subliners. They lost to Ultra was against subliners in the final of Major 4 and they lost. They got swept 5-0. And 4-0.
Mm-hmm.
It was best of 7, right? Yeah, 4-0. Sorry, 4-0. And then they could have beaten they were up against subliners, losers bracket final, chance to make the finals, and they lose to subliners again which eliminates them from the tournament, right? So they underperformed there. But the last time there was a Pro-Am, Ultra did win that. Ultra is really weirdly good at winning these kind of one-off tournaments. They're good at winning that. They also won, if you remember correctly, they won the kickoff tournament in Vanguard as well. Again, similar team, not the same team, but a similar team. They won the kickoff tournament in Vanguard, and then they also won another Pro-Am. No, I don't think they won the first Pro-Am. I think they won the kickoff Vanguard kickoff tournament, which was a Pro-Am. And they usually win random off tournaments, and as many as there have been. There haven't been a ton of them, but they've generally been good in these kind of one-shot and done tournaments, and I love Ultra here, right? The whole thing of Optic was, and I remember I said this in our preview, right? Because I said something to the effect that LAG at plus 150 to plus 1.5, plus 150 against Optic. I said either this is the best deal ever, or the books are right and Optic is going to make a rebound. And I said it's either one of those. It's one of those, and clearly Optic had the rebound and they swept that 3-0. And I think that part of the reason why the books even had it priced that way was they were saying, okay, Optic, they were bad, but they're going to recover, they're going to bounce back, they're going to realize, hey, we have to fix things and do this. The same things you could, now it's to a lesser extent, but the same things you said about Optic before Champs, you could say about Ultra now. You could say, okay, they struggled, they were good in Major 4, then they struggled a bit at Champs, obviously losing to Thieves and then losing to Subliners. They struggled a bit, but I think you can make the case that if there's a team that's going to positively regress going forward, it's going to be Ultra, right? And I think you can make the point that it's going to regress, it's going to be Optic, right? At that point, then you're just basically like, this is why honestly Ultra plus 160. Again, we talked about their path earlier, is pretty good, right? All you have to do is you have to take down Subliners. I think you could definitely do that. Sorry, Cloud9. You have to take out Cloud9. If you could take out Cloud9, you're in finals, right? You cash a plus 160. So I really do Ultra here. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, quick, want to point out, so the methodology on this is a little different. I didn't go through all the iterations of every group play, however that could go, throw it into a bracket and then simulate the bracket. I literally just took the chalk bracket that I showed earlier and then ran the sims on that. So as you can see, like if you look at Carolina right in the middle of that graph, I have them at a 0% chance, and I actually think they'd have a higher chance of, reaching the final than Vegas, who is just to the left of them. The numbers aren't perfect, and a lot of this is based on the fact that Toronto, it doesn't look like they're going to be on the same side of the bracket as Atlanta FaZe, and to me that's the big deal here, whereas Optic look like they are. Now, weird things can happen, and one of those teams maybe isn't the 1 seed out of their group, and now we have a cluster of those teams all condensed into one, and then if that's the case, the one team that's not with those 3, their odds are going to shoot up very high, just considering that they'll have an easy path through to the final. So yeah, these numbers are far from perfect, but it does show that, again, if things play out how they should in group play, relatively speaking, if things are somewhat chalky, which in a tournament like this, I think we can expect just because there's so many really bad teams, not to be hurtful to anybody, but yeah, Toronto should have a good path if things go the way they should. And I still think they're solid. These numbers just seem to indicate that FaZe are the best, Optic and Cloud9 are right there, and then there's Toronto, and they're on their own tier. And I just totally disagree with that. I think Toronto have the firepower to be with Optic, to be with Cloud9, and if things go right and they can avoid FaZe, or heck, even if they square up against FaZe, they definitely have the firepower to take them out. So that's largely where these numbers are coming from, but I will definitely rerun the bracket simulations once we have the bracket totally figured out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Odds to win. Optic plus 225, Cloud9 plus 250, Ultra plus 330, 100 Thieves 12-1, FaZe obviously plus 200. Surge 16-1, but everybody just, again, it's the same kind of thing we've always been talking about. They just start fading really fast. There's just an immediate drop off once you get past those top 4 or 5. I think you have some numbers here, and again, model like FaZe. Wow, surprising. Again, FaZe is weird, right? They are so good and so dominant, and then they play against a good team, and then it's just like, what are you doing? What is happening? Again, you're looking at, like the value on Ultra, I like the value on FaZe a bit as well. But FaZe is too much. You're betting at plus 200. It's not really much value there. You worry about FaZe just failing. Honestly, I think it'd be really funny if this just ends up as like a FaZe Toronto final. I feel like that would be the way this ends. This is like the classic like, oh, okay, we have this tournament, everything's doing is just FaZe Ultra FaZe again, which is basically the classic matchup of the CDL. But that's just my take on it. But again, this has been a top 4 league, and those are the last time the other two top teams played off. I feel like these two teams are like vaguely due to place off in a final. So that's my take on it. But we'll see. But yeah, I see some value in Toronto. I don't love the value on FaZe, but there probably is some value on FaZe there as well. And do you see any other value on here, or is it just those plays?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep taking FaZe. Like they keep losing these majors and champs was their worst placement of the year so far. Again, some of that is a little fluky with how Toronto ended up in the lower bracket so quickly as well. But yeah, I don't know. The price just keeps dropping on them so drastically that it is appealing to some extent. And FaZe are like, they're a guaranteed stone cold lock to make the bracket. When you look at their group, yeah, they're in the group with 2 other challengers teams, and one of those might be one of the half decent ones. But again, if your FaZe beat the worst team in Team Falcons, and that should be no problem at all. And then even if you do trip up against 100 Thieves in that second round, okay, you either have to beat Team Falcons again, or you have to beat the other challengers team. So thankfully they're in that group. That gives them a little boost as well, I think, just knowing that like they couldn't really get tripped up by a CDL team unless they meet Thieves twice somehow, but that's probably not going to happen, or it can't happen. So yeah, I like FaZe here. I think Toronto definitely can have value. A lot of that dependent on where they land in the bracket, and that's the big thing right now, is just like, how does this bracket shake out? Is it what we think it is, or are there a few more upsets than we would expect? Again, I'll rerun the numbers once we get that bracket, but yeah, it looks like a 4-team race per usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed with that. Okay, being the market and combined model plays, here are our picks for this weekend. I have Carolina versus Legion. I really like G2 versus Seattle. I actually really like that play. I like that, and I'm also on Ultra to win Esports World Cup plus 330. You have FaZe to win the Esports World Cup. I also don't hate that either. I might just play that as well. Ultra to reach the final plus 160. Again, I actually, if I'm playing it to win, plus 160 to make the final, I don't hate it as well. And then you really like G2 versus Seattle. I don't hate that as well. I wouldn't mind a play on that as well. Group are basically our combined model plays. We have Carolina map moneyline map 2, G2 moneyline plus 1.5 map 1, and then Heretics moneyline / 1.5. We do have that as combined play, but I am probably staying away from that because I think Boston might be a little better than expected. And then obviously futures were combined on the. I have them to win, you have them to make the final, so that means it's a combined model play of us for them to reach the final. And yeah, that is about it. So we will be back some point in the future for the 24-25 season preview. We are penciling that in for November, December, whenever that is. I suspect we will have some Call of Duty League news in the thing is, we're probably going to have a lot of news in the relatively near future, but we'll have some formatting news in the relatively near future. And once that's done, then we will be back next year. And I suspect this league is going to look very different, but I could be wrong. But I think it will look very different. And I would not be surprised if we have a tournament right after launch. And if we do, we will be back here we'll be here in, I guess early November. We might be here very soon. Yeah, we will let you know when we're back. So, other than that, enjoy Esports World Cup. It's actually pretty fun. I watched it. I watched pieces of it for League of Legends. I actually think this could be really interesting. Enjoy the Esports World Cup. Enjoy the off season. And Black Ops 6 looks great. Enjoy that if that comes out before we see you again. And yeah, we'll see you later, everybody. Have a good summer.
See ya.